8. X-rays were once used to remove unwanted hair, and for some patients, the price of smooth skin was skin that never properly healed. In 1895, Wilhelm Röntgen announced the discovery of X-rays. Within months, doctors were already experimenting with the invisible rays on human tissue. Then someone noticed something useful. Hair fell out. By 1896 and 1897, physicians in Europe were deliberately exposing patches of skin to X-rays to destroy hair follicles. The attraction was obvious. No razors, no painful plucking, no chemicals. Just sit beneath a machine and let invisible radiation do the work. The problem was dosage. Early operators had almost no reliable way to measure how much radiation the skin had absorbed. A treatment that appeared painless could continue damaging tissue long after the patient left the room. Burns appeared, ulcers opened, skin sometimes died. One of the earliest documented patients treated for excessive hair growth successfully lost the hair, but also developed a deep ulcer in the irradiated area. The technique did not disappear. By the 1920s, commercial beauty clinics in the United States were offering X-ray hair removal to women who wanted permanently smooth faces. Thousands reportedly underwent repeated exposures. Radiation damage was cumulative. The customer might walk out looking perfectly normal. Years later, the bill arrived: scarring, chronic skin injury, premature aging, and eventually cancers associated with repeated radiation exposure. The machine had removed the hair. It had simply removed other things with it. 7. Belladonna could make a woman's eyes look larger within minutes. It could also make her unable to see them. Atropa belladonna has an unusually appropriate name. Belladonna means beautiful lady. The plant is also called deadly nightshade. Its extracts contain atropine, a chemical capable of blocking parts of the nervous system. When placed into the eye, atropine relaxes muscles that control the iris. The pupil expands. For centuries, large dark pupils were associated with attraction, softness, and desire. Women in parts of Europe reportedly used belladonna preparations to create that appearance deliberately. One drop could transform the eyes. It could also transform vision. The same mechanism that enlarges the pupil interferes with the eye's ability to focus. Light becomes painfully bright. Nearby objects blur. The effects can last far longer than the person applying the drops expected. Higher exposure is worse. Atropine poisoning can produce a racing heartbeat, dry mouth, confusion, hallucinations, overheating, and dangerous disturbances of heart rhythm. At sufficiently high doses, the nervous system begins to fail. This was not an unknown plant accidentally placed inside a cosmetic bottle. Belladonna had been recognized as poisonous since antiquity. That was part of what made the practice remarkable. The desired effect and the toxic effect came from the same chemical. There was no clean boundary between them. Beauty required dilation. Poison provided it. 6. In 19th century Europe, one of the most fashionable colors in the room could contain arsenic. In 1775, chemist Carl Wilhelm Scheele developed a brilliant green pigment that became known as Scheele's green. Later, arsenic-based greens became even more vivid, and Victorians loved them. Green appeared on wallpaper, artificial flowers, decorations, toys, and clothing. Under gaslight and candlelight, the color could look almost unnaturally intense. That was because it was. Arsenic compounds helped create the effect. A fashionable green dress could contain pigment applied to enormous areas of fabric. Artificial leaves and flowers were sometimes heavily dusted with arsenic-based color. The people most brutally exposed were often the workers who manufactured them. They handled the pigment every day. Powder coated their fingers, dust entered the air. Particles reached the mouth, lungs, and skin. Reports began describing sores, gastrointestinal illness, and severe sickness among workers producing arsenic-colored goods. The customer faced a smaller but still unnecessary exposure. Pigment could flake from fabric. Dust could collect in rooms. Heat, moisture, and friction could move contaminated material from clothing into the surrounding environment. The dress looked alive. The chemistry was less accommodating. Fashion had discovered a spectacular shade of green. Unfortunately, arsenic had discovered fashion. 5. Some Victorians did not merely wear arsenic. They swallowed it for better skin. During the 19th century, pale, clear skin carried powerful social meaning. It could suggest that a person did not spend the day working outdoors. Cosmetic manufacturers understood the market. Among the stranger products sold were arsenic complexion wafers. They were exactly what the name suggested: small preparations containing arsenic, marketed with promises of improving the complexion and removing freckles, pimples, or other unwanted marks. Advertisements presented arsenic as controlled beauty chemistry. That was optimistic. Arsenic interferes with fundamental cellular processes. Sufficient exposure can cause vomiting, severe abdominal pain, diarrhea, cardiovascular collapse, and neurological problems. Long-term exposure creates a different list: skin changes, nerve damage, cardiovascular disease, increased cancer risk. But there was another problem. Customers were consuming the product intentionally. A dress might expose someone accidentally. A complexion wafer turned exposure into a routine. Take one today, another tomorrow. Then continue because the bottle says beauty requires consistency. The most unsettling detail is that these products were not hidden in some underground market. Examples survive in museum collections. They were packaged, branded, advertised, and reassuringly labeled. One manufacturer even sold safe arsenic complexion wafers. The arsenic was real. The adjective was doing most of the work. 4. Renaissance Beauty offered another pale complexion, this time painted directly onto the face with lead. For centuries, pale skin was associated with wealth and status in parts of Europe. By the Renaissance and early modern period, one way to create it was white lead. Lead carbonate produced a dense, smooth, white pigment with excellent coverage. Painters used it. So did people. One famous cosmetic preparation became known as Venetian ceruse, commonly described as a mixture involving white lead and vinegar. Applied across the face, it created an opaque porcelain appearance. It also placed lead directly against the skin. Lead is a cumulative poison. Once absorbed, it can circulate through the blood and accumulate in tissue and bone. Repeated exposure can damage the nervous system, kidneys, and other organs. The cosmetic created an especially cruel cycle. Lead-based preparations could irritate and damage the skin. Damaged skin then needed more makeup to hide it. More makeup meant more exposure. Historical beauty recipes themselves sometimes acknowledged that white lead could make the face appear extremely pale while causing the skin to age badly. Yet it remained useful because few alternatives offered the same smooth white coverage. This was not ignorance in the simplest sense. The dangerous reputation of lead gradually became well established. The product remained desirable anyway. The face looked cleaner. The chemistry became dirtier. 3. Mercury was also invited into the beauty routine. If lead could whiten the face, mercury compounds promised to correct what remained. 19th century beauty manuals and cosmetic recipes recommended mercury-containing preparations for discoloration, blemishes, and even problems around the eyelids. One substance was mercuric chloride, historically known as corrosive sublimate. The name should have ended the discussion. It did not. Mercury compounds can damage the nervous system and kidneys. Some forms are highly corrosive. Exposure through skin products can become systemic, particularly when concentrations are high or when the skin is already damaged. That last detail mattered. A customer applying mercury to irritated skin could create conditions that made absorption easier. Symptoms did not necessarily look dramatic at first. Tremors might appear. Mood and memory could change. Hands could become unsteady. Kidneys could suffer silently. And because cosmetic poisoning did not announce itself with a label, the user might respond to worsening skin by applying more cosmetic. Beauty routines are powerful because they depend on repetition. Mercury poisoning used exactly the same schedule. Morning, evening, repeat. The bottle promised clearer skin. The body kept the receipts. 2. Then the 20th century discovered radiation and briefly decided it belonged in the bathroom. Radium was isolated at the end of the 19th century. Almost immediately, the new phenomenon of radioactivity became associated with modernity, energy, and scientific progress. Then marketers arrived. During the early 20th century, radioactive language appeared across consumer products. Some companies sold creams, powders, soaps, and other preparations that claimed to contain radioactive ingredients or benefit from radiation. One British line called Radior advertised cosmetics containing radium by 1918. Later, the French brand Thoradia built an entire luxury identity around radioactive science. To a customer at the time, this could sound futuristic. Radiation was invisible. It seemed energetic. Medicine was experimenting with it. Why should beauty not do the same? Because ionizing radiation does not rejuvenate cells by asking politely. It damages molecules. It can break DNA. Radium is particularly dangerous when it enters the body because it behaves chemically somewhat like calcium and can accumulate in bone. The famous radium girls were not beauty customers. They were factory workers painting luminous watch dials. But their injuries demonstrated what radium could do when internal exposure occurred. Jaw destruction, bone disease, anemia, cancer, death. The cosmetics industry had taken one of the newest discoveries in physics and converted its mystery into advertising. Scientific understanding needed time. Marketing did not. But perhaps the most disturbing beauty ritual was not a single poison. It was the belief that poison itself could be managed if the result looked good enough. Look again at the list. Arsenic was worn, then swallowed. Lead was painted across the face. Mercury was rubbed into damaged skin. Belladonna was dropped directly into the eyes. Radiation was aimed at hair follicles. Radioactivity was packaged as rejuvenation. None of these practices came from one civilization or one moment of collective madness. They appeared across centuries, different countries, different technologies, different definitions of beauty. The common mechanism was simpler. A visible result appeared quickly. The damage often appeared later. That delay mattered. If a cosmetic burns immediately, people stop using it. If the skin looks smoother today while lead accumulates slowly, the product appears to work. If an X-ray treatment removes hair before radiation damage becomes visible, the machine appears effective. If belladonna enlarges the pupil before poisoning becomes obvious, the first result looks like success. Historical beauty treatments were dangerous, not because people in the past were foolish. They were dangerous because human beings are unusually vulnerable to anything that gives an immediate reward while hiding a delayed cost. And manufacturers understood that long before modern advertising existed. The strangest part is not that dangerous cosmetics disappeared. Many did. The strangest part is why lead white was eventually replaced. Arsenic pigments fell out of fashion. X-ray beauty clinics vanished. Radioactive cosmetics became absurd instead of futuristic. Not because beauty standards disappeared, because chemistry became harder to ignore. For centuries, the mirror showed only the result. The body recorded everything else.